force all new buildings to start integrating 6G antennae into the architecture? Maybe. We might even need to have 6G transmitters baked into home furniture. Because remember, these waves are so easily blocked, you probably would need multiple transmitters per home. But even if we solve that problem, for 6G to bring the benefits that we want from it, it can't just be faster. It has to be all those other things as well. So, as well as suggesting sub-millimeter wave technology, Samsung also suggested a couple of other candidate technologies to sit alongside it. They suggested, what if we take advantage of all the extra intelligence we've gained in the last 10 years by baking AI into 6G tech directly? It might mean that your devices on 6G could automatically talk to each other and smartly
Ну я
manage
не самый
data
умный, конечно,
between
но
them.
смотри, а если ты эти волны пропишешь уже этих уже сочинений, я понял уже, что да.
Samsung also mentioned
себе так
novel
думаю,
antenna technology,
ну,
which
да.
I think is another way of saying
Ладно,
we need a more efficient way to build our antennae,
подожди.
but we don't know what it is yet. Another
Да.
option is maybe instead of having one cell tower that transmits and loads of devices that receive, to make each 6G device capable of being both a receiver and a transmitter. So you could have like a web of devices that are both receiving 6G, but also helping each other to connect to 6G. One thing that does kind of help its case is the fact that when 5G was built, it was built with the capacity to be upgraded. So it's possible that 6G could kind of use the existing towers and framework that has already been built, as opposed to starting from scratch. Anyways, my stance is that I think it's cool. I'm actually excited about this. If I had to guess though, I would say that we probably won't be able to keep up this rate of new generation every 10 years. I would say that given the difficulties we're having with 5G, 6G won't be a viable replacement until 2035. But it's still good to know what we're working towards. Also, so far, each time we've gone from one generation of wireless network to another, there's been a huge jump in power consumption. But I get the feeling that for 6G, because of how aware we're becoming of the damage we're doing to the planet, and because of how much we're trying to slow that down, it might have to somewhat adjust its aspirations based on this. Like, if companies get told, for your 6G infrastructure, you're only allowed to use the same amount of energy as 5G is currently using, then you can imagine they won't be able to make something as powerful, versus if they've just been let loose to go crazy with it. If you enjoyed this video, do consider subscribing, that'd be great. My name is Aaron, this is Mr. Who's the Boss, and I'll get you in the next one.
Ну, каюшки, да. Давай, народ и... Ну, наоборот.
Приложить горячее яйцо или компресс. Так лечили заложенность носа раньше.
Попробуйте ринофлуимуцил. Два активных вещества в его составе растворяют и выводят слизь, а также снимают заложенность носа. Ринофлуимуцил. Он действует. Вы дышите. Имеются противопоказания. Ознакомьтесь с инструкцией.
Okay, Apple has a master plan, and I'm going to show you exactly what I think it is. But before that'll make sense, how did Apple even get to here? How did Apple manage to create the most profitable fan base on the planet? It's simple. No, really, it's the principle of simplicity. But creating simplicity for the user actually means a lot of work behind the scenes. Take the Apple Pencil. When I put it down, it rolls up until the word pencil is facing up, and then it'll just stop. That means if I put it down now, it won't keep rolling, it won't fall off the table, it'll just sit there. And it's such a simple trick as far as the user is concerned that you don't even realize it's happening. But Apple spent months working on the weight distribution. Or Product packaging. For the iPhone, Apple tested hundreds of different prototypes just to get a box that opens at a constant velocity when you lift the lid. Not so slow that it's annoying, but slow enough that it builds anticipation for when you see your new phone. Or probably my favorite is that, as far as the user's concerned, the iPhone 11 can take 4K video at 60 frames per second. But when you do that, what your iPhone's actually doing is shooting 4K at 120 frames per second, with every alternating frame being a low exposure frame, which is fused with a normal exposure frame to keep the brightest areas from overexposing. And I feel like a lot of companies would make a huge racket about being able to do this, but Apple just decided that that's going to make our product less simple, so we're not going to talk about it. And this whole concept of creating simplicity, Apple uses it for everything. Take product announcements. Tech companies just keep talking. Huawei's Twitter page, for example, makes 5 announcements a day. There's a promotional offer, or they're sharing a review someone's left for them. And then you realize Huawei has 15 different accounts doing this at the same time. They've got billboard ads and YouTube ads and Facebook ads all year round. And you kind of care, but because you see so much of this messaging from all of these companies, Huawei's messaging blends into Samsung's messaging, which blends into LG's messaging, and it all just becomes noise. So what does Apple do? Apple is silent for 95% of the year. They have 4.5 million followers on Twitter, but they've never made a proper tweet. And so when Apple does make an announcement, it's like the whole tech world stops to listen to what they have to say. It's not like Apple is any more important than Samsung, it's just that Apple keeps it simple. They just talk when they have something big to say. And I think in that sense they do it right. Simple is even how Apple addresses its products. And I won't lie to you, I think this can be kind of annoying for tech-savvy people like us who want specs and numbers, and they just don't do it. Apple doesn't communicate features, they talk about benefits. For the simple reason that this makes people feel something. You might remember when they launched the first iPod. I wouldn't say it was anything groundbreaking, it was okay. And if all they'd done was to just say, look, we've got a new MP3 player, it's got 5 gigabytes of storage, I don't think anyone would have cared. But the angle Apple took was, this product will give you 1,000 songs in your pocket. Think about that line. And when you think about it, you're probably not thinking anymore about a dull box and storage capacities. You're thinking about your own playlist and flicking through it on your iPod with your favorite song being blasted through your ears. You feel. And the final thing Apple does to make things simple for their customers is Apple pretends other brands don't exist. They don't mention other companies.
Ну да, понял.
Please, they don't compare benchmark scores to Samsung. All they say is that this model is a certain percent faster than the last model, and that's all you need to know. And I think this subconsciously affects every single person who drops what they're doing to listen to Apple. It changes the question in their head of which phone do I buy to which iPhone do I buy? And for the people who are already in that ecosystem, it creates lock-in. It means that from the point when you buy your first iPhone, the only decision you have to make from that point onwards is, do I buy this iPhone or do I wait until the next year? And Apple does the exact same thing with its ecosystem products. They act like AirPods are the only earphones on the planet, that the Apple Watch is the only watch you could possibly consider buying. It's almost like they live in a parallel universe where the only tech products that exist are Apple products. Here's the thing, the way they've managed to connect with people through simplicity means that Apple fans follow suit. You probably know a few people like this. They have an iPhone, they have AirPods. They might even call themselves tech enthusiasts, but really the only tech that matters to them is Apple tech. So okay, Apple is killing it right now, and no stat better represents this than how they have around 20% of the smartphone market, which is good, but how with only this, they have 66% of all profit. That's crazy. Because Apple makes their own chipsets too, for every phone they sell, they save the $30 or $50 cut that every Android maker has to give straight to Qualcomm. So more profit. But this is where we start to look forward, because Apple's been acting weird. Apple's been doing a lot of things recently that seem very un-Apple. And my theory as to why is that smartphone sales are falling. This in itself is not surprising. A lot of the people who just want a working smartphone now have a working smartphone. But what is interesting is how Apple, over the last 3 years, has slowly but surely changed tact. Whilst historically Apple has been perfectly happy with this 20% market share because they make so much profit per model, if this pool of people who are buying new phones starts to shrink, then tech companies have to start looking for profit in other places. Enter subscription-based services, like Apple Music. And here's the beauty of one of these. Instead of a normal purchase, where, let's say I'm the company, I've got to convince you to buy this year, I've got to convince you to buy again next year, and then I've got to convince you to buy again the year after that. With a subscription, I've only got to convince you to buy once. And then providing I don't disappoint you or mess up, that's it. Steady, predictable income. How much income, you might ask? Well, Apple currently has 6 main subscriptions on offer. You've got Apple Arcade and Apple TV Plus, which are $5 a month each. You've got Apple Music, News Plus, and iCloud, which are $10 a month each. And then the iPhone upgrade program, where you always get the latest iPhone, is going to cost you around $50 a month. Add these up, that's $90 a month, which across 2 years is $2,160. And after all that, you still don't own the phone. If you want to keep it, you pay for it. So, you can understand that as far as tech companies are concerned, subscriptions are the future. And Apple isn't the only one. Slowly but surely, whether you've noticed it or not, pretty much every internet company is slowly creeping towards some sort of monthly payment. Amazon Prime, even YouTube with YouTube Premium. And I think it's only a matter of time before we get an Apple Plus or some sort of equivalent, where Apple throws all of these things together into some sort of bundled subscription service. But this is Apple's big dilemma. Their past strategy doesn't fit perfectly into this new future. If you want to sell a subscription to people, you've got to get your device into as many people's hands as possible. But Apple hasn't really done this. If anything, Apple has purposefully sold their phones to fewer people to keep things simple. Apple could have made 50 different phones for every single possible price point, but they didn't, because they wanted to focus on a few models and really control the end user experience. You can't do that as well with 50 different phones. As a result, Android right now has almost 80% of the smartphone users worldwide. And even though this group of people is, on average, a lower income group, it's also a rising income group. So, to counter this, Apple has needed to become a bit more like Android. They've needed to offer multiple phones at multiple different price points. And I think that's the reason we got the iPhone SE. It's A, to give long-time iPhone 6 or iPhone 7 users an affordable upgrade option so they don't go over to Android, and B, to steal Android users. Because every person who jumps ship to iPhone is one more person who could subscribe to Apple News Plus and Apple Music. So when I first saw the iPhone SE, I was already 95% sure this is what Apple were trying to do. But because there was that 5% uncertainty, I ended up just scrapping the video. But over the last few weeks, Apple's revealed 2 pieces of information that mean that I'm now 99% convinced. So first up, iOS 14. For the longest time, Android has had a few killer advantages over iOS. Customization, choice, granular control. And they're such simple features that Apple could have added them at any time, but they didn't. Because historically, Apple has benefited from having tight control over the end user experience. But iOS 14 changes that. It introduced arrangeable, resizable widgets for the first time ever. You now get an app drawer, so you don't need to have all your apps on your home screens. You can change your default browser, and picture-in-picture mode means that Apple's multitasking no longer sucks. Why did Apple wait 10 years to add such simple things to their phones? Well, I would say it's because now more than ever, Apple needs Android users to switch. iOS 14 is a direct attack on Android. Okay, do you know what the final piece of the puzzle is? I would say it's what's happening with the MacBooks. Bear with me here. If you've ever tried to buy a MacBook, you'll have noticed something very funny about them. You have absolutely no idea when the next one is coming out. It could be January, could be June, could be not at all this year. Now, isn't that kind of weird from a company that releases their iPhones so on the dot predictably? Well, long story short, for quite a few years now, Apple has been relying on Intel to produce its processors and AMD to produce their graphics. And it's not paying off. Apple has no control over how much performance improves each time. Sometimes Intel delivers the chip and it's like literally a 5% improvement, and also they're often delayed, which means that Apple ends up delivering a late product to consumers, and one that they're not particularly proud of. So, a few weeks ago, Apple basically said, forget this, we're going to use our own chips for our MacBooks. And on the face of it, this seems like just a knee-jerk reaction to Intel's inconsistency, but I'd be willing to bet that Apple has been planning to do this for a long time anyway. Why? To funnel more users into Apple's services. As of right now, Apple only controls like 10% of the computer market, so there's the potential to reach a vast amount of new people who don't at all use any Apple products. And using their own chips could be the key to that. By using a similar mobile chip to the one found in the iPhones and the iPad Pro, Apple could make a hyper-efficient laptop in a super slim body with a full 2-day battery life. And call me crazy, I think there's a good chance Apple will make a cheaper model too. After all, they can manufacture a powerful phone chipset for $30, so they could quite feasibly create a laptop equivalent to that for $50. And when you put that up against other companies like Dell and Acer, who are going to be paying $300 to Intel and AMD for the equivalent, Apple has a serious strategic leg up. And the other implication of using Apple mobile chips is that it doesn't just make Macs more appealing, it makes all Apple products more appealing. Because with this, Macs can now use iOS applications. And with a bit of tweaking, iOS can run Mac applications. Now, obviously, Apple mobile chips is that it doesn't just make Macs more appealing, it makes all Apple products more appealing. Because with this, Macs can now use iOS applications. And with a bit of tweaking, iOS can run Mac applications. Now, obviously you're not just going to sit there playing Angry Birds on your laptop, but this is huge. Apple is bringing together two different user bases, and everyone wins. Developers have more of an incentive to make apps for Apple, because now all of a sudden they can be used by a larger pool of people, and the customers benefit. If you're a Mac user, you're suddenly getting access to the biggest app store in the world. And if you're an iPhone or iPad user, you might well end up seeing pro-level photo and video editing apps, which were made for Mac and then ported over. So, what's the big picture here? How does all this tie together? Am I about to tell you that the Mac is about to merge with the iPad and the iPhone to become some sort of hybrid super machine? No, for the simple reason that Apple wants you to buy all of their products. Apple doesn't want to beta test with a new product category, they want to just have the best products within each existing category. Think about it. At the very center of everything is Apple services. To get sustained profit over time, this is where Apple wants to get people. And for a while now, the main funnel, the main entry point into these services has been the iPhone. The iPhone would lead people into Apple Music, Apple News, and also other Apple products. The watch, AirPods, the iPad. But because the iPhone was expensive, and because it was the only real main entry point, Apple needed more of a flow into their services. So they introduced iOS 14 and the new iPhone SE. They somewhat gave up the simplicity and the control they'd worked so hard to create in order to make the iPhones more accessible. And instead of just relying on the iPhone, Apple's now made its other products more distinct and more able to stand on their own 2 feet. They've turned the iPad from just a big iPhone into a computer with its own iPadOS operating system. They've turned the watch from an iPhone accessory to an independent smartwatch with its own app store. And most people would say it's not just the best smartwatch for if you have an iPhone, it's the best smartwatch full stop. Apple's about to make a Mac that's far better than any Mac before, and one that might just be cheaper. You get the idea. Before you know it, Apple's got multiple products dominating their own respective product categories, all feeding a much wider user base into this core of Apple's services. You see it, right? The iPhone is no longer a bottleneck. And I would go as far as to say that once you reach the middle, there's a ricochet effect. Because of how each of these products is almost purpose-built to run Apple's services, once a person has reached the middle and is paying monthly to use those Apple services, they might as well buy more Apple devices to consume them with. So the sale of one piece of hardware indirectly leads to the sale of more hardware. There's one more thing. A lot of people don't like Apple's new software skins. There are icons that look very rounded, there are strange shadows behind things, even though Apple has spent literally the last 10 years trying to remove shadows. And Siri is now a 3D shape. Why? Did Apple just stop paying its designers and this is their way of trolling us? Probably not. I think it's because augmented reality is coming. Apple is working on some sort of glasses or headset that gives you some smart capabilities on your face. And I think Apple's recent announcements all but confirm this. They even said that AirPods are getting an update that allow for spatial audio. Why could that be? And the reason augmented reality is so potentially important is that it's a completely new category of products where, frankly, the sky's the limit. No one knows what it's capable of. And guess what? It's the perfect channel to lead more users to Apple News and Apple Music. I could bet my bottom dollar that whatever this thing is Apple comes out with, it will support Apple's services. So, these are just my thoughts. And as a fun little challenge to myself, I actually tried to make this video using Apple's own philosophies. So I spent 7 full days just working on this video script, looking at every single sentence thinking, do you need that? Is this really important or particularly interesting? Can I make this simpler? So let me know what you thought to that. I'm dead on the inside. So thanks for watching. A sub would be incredible. My name is Aaron. This is Mr. Who's the Boss. And I'll catch you in the next one.
Чаепитки. Отлично.
Did you know that Google accidentally caused an invasion? Or that they're developing a computer so powerful it can program itself? Well, it's true, and that is just the tip of the iceberg. So welcome to my top 50 things to know about them. Also, massive shout out to Surfshark VPN for sponsoring this video. Google has its main headquarters in California, spread across a massive campus. It calls the Googleplex. But what happens there might surprise you. For starters, Google makes it a mission to keep stress as low as possible. They've installed high-tech energy pods, which use NASA science to help people achieve brief but effective naps during the day. And probably my favorite thing, slides. Right out of the playground to get from upper floors to lower floors. It is a weird touch, for sure, but I can see how it gives people little moments of stress relief. And it's not just about stress. Google's campus is partly built like a playground to stimulate creativity. One example of this in action is, you know that Dino Run game that pops up on Google when you have no internet? Well, that was in part inspired by the massive T-Rex dinosaur statue they have there. Funny story, as well as the whole creativity element, that statue was bought to remind the workers at Google to make sure that Google doesn't go extinct, like the dinosaurs did. They even refute convention when it comes to naming their employees. If you're a mature Google worker, you're a Googler. If you're a new intake, you're a Noogler. If you've left the company, you're like an X, therefore a Xoogler. And if you've got a pet, it's a Doogler. But I gotta say, the perks are definitely worth the eccentricity. Googlers get gourmet dishes from around the world cooked for them. They don't pay for it, and the founders made it clear that no employee should be more than 200 feet from a cafeteria. If this wasn't enough of a perk, when a Google employee dies, their partner gets half of their wage for the next 10 years. So, this out-the-box thinking is definitely one of the factors I think has contributed to Google becoming a success story. They're incredibly young. Google is actually less old than even Netflix, and yet they've got one of the highest revenues of all time. They make around $200,000 of revenue per minute. Not quite as much as Apple's $300,000, but not a figure to be looked down on by any stretch. It's crazy to think then, with everything they built, that Google only exists because of an incredibly lucky encounter. The two founders, Larry Page and Sergey Brin, they only met because Larry was considering applying to a grad school, and Sergey just so happened to be at that grad school, and was assigned to show him around on the day. In the early days, Google was actually called Backrub. There was a reason. Back then, when people would search, your website was ranked just based on how many backlinks it had. Or in other words, how many other sites had links that came back to your site. If there were lots of other sites linking to your site, Google considered it an important site and therefore ranked it higher. They spent a year with this name before seeing the bigger picture they could create with this technology, after which Backrub became Google, named after the very real word, Google. A Google is the name given to a massive number, 1 followed by 100 zeros. It just signifies the idea that Google intended to become this almost limitless bank of information. But it wasn't always high-tech offices and gourmet food. The entirety of Google was first stored on 10 4GB hard drives, arranged in, wait for it, a Lego store-nation. But it wasn't always high-tech offices and gourmet food. The entirety of Google was first stored on 10 4GB hard drives, arranged in, wait for it, a Lego casing. The Lego actually made it easy for them to attach more storage later. Compare that, then, to the 20 petabytes of information that Google processes per day now. It's a world apart, even though it's only been 20 years. To try and conceptualize just how much information 1 petabyte carries, imagine a 4-drawer filing cabinet. You know the big ones, the ones that are kind of just as tall as a person. Pack that full of paper, full to the brim, with each page packed with information. Then, combine 1,000 of these filing cabinets together to create one super filing cabinet. And then, get 20,000 of those. That's just 1 petabyte. Okay, what about Google's smartphone operating system, Android? Why is a mobile phone OS named after a robot? Well, Andy Rubin, who is one of the founders, was given the nickname Android at his previous job, just because of how much he loved robotics. Also interesting is the logo. The person who designed it, she actually got her inspiration from a bathroom sign. The word Android usually refers to a male robot, so she took the men's bathroom image, adjusted it to fit the brief, and used a green color to signify growth. Because I guess plants are green and plants grow. This one's unexpected. You might know that Microsoft's Windows mobile software kind of failed to gain traction, but that doesn't mean they've completely failed in the smartphone space. They actually make a ton of money from Android, between $5 and $15 per smartphone sold. They own patents that Android supposedly infringes on, but instead of just taking them to court, both parties are better off if Microsoft just tells Android to pay them royalties for it. And speaking of patents, Google loves them, and I've got a few favorites. Google has patented an electronic tattoo with a tiny working printed circuit board made to power an internal microphone that can be placed inside your body to make communication with your smart devices clearer. They've also patented a smart walking stick with embedded cameras and a GPS system created to capture Google Maps street views in remote locations. The idea was to hand these out to employees to go walking with, and when they do that, every time their stick would touch the ground, the camera on top would take a photo, and the GPS module would associate that with specific coordinates. They have even tried to patent the hand heart gesture, and it has got nothing to do with showing someone your feelings about them. When they were investing heavily in their Google Glass project, glasses that could see the world with augmented reality, they wanted a hand gesture that people could make in front of their glasses to tell the glasses to take a photo of whatever you were seeing. Also related to this, you probably know, Google makes a lot of their money from advertising, and the best way to maximize this revenue is to make sure that the ads you're sending are well matched to the consumers seeing those ads. If you, as a viewer, like an ad you see, it's a win-win situation. You're discovering a new product you'll find useful, and the company selling it potentially gets a new sale. So, in order to best match these ads with the customers, Google wants to know as much information about you as possible, and they've made it clear that they've wanted to go further. They actually applied for a patent to equip smartphones with sensors that could detect environmental conditions like light and temperature to further personalized ads based on this. So for example, they could know if you're sitting in the baking hot sun, and then they could send you a personalized advert for a local ice cream van. They also patented a gaze tracking system, where whilst showing adverts, Google can see if people are actually looking at them. They can see where your pupils are facing, and even the dilation of them, which would signal how much of an emotional response the advert evoked. And this leads me on to the slightly creepy side of Google, starting with our reliance on it. On the 16th of August 2013, Google went down for 5 minutes, and in that time, global internet traffic went down by 40%. That is crazy. Or another example, the American country of Nicaragua accidentally invaded Costa Rica because of a Google Maps error. Maps said that Nicaragua owned a piece of land that was actually part of Costa Rica. So without realizing it was just a mistake on Google's end, the Nicaraguans, they actually went to Costa Rica and started planting their flags down. A few years ago, Google acquired a company called DeepMind, who was working on something they called the Neural Turing Machine, a computer built in a similar way to the human brain, combining human pattern recognition with the sheer ability of a computer to just crunch numbers. It can program itself. It's not all creepy though. Google is a company that likes to have a lot of fun, and one of the ways they do this is through Easter eggs. Their products and services are littered with them. If you search Google in 1998, it'll show you how the site looked back in the day.